Hello to everyone. We're just waiting for several seconds and we will start. Okay, we are ready to start our webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. We thank you for joining us today. And I'm delighted to welcome you at the webinar series for Library and Information Sciences students, brought to you by the professional units of the Division C of IFLA. My name is Albina Krymskaya. I'm the chair of the section on education and training in IFLA. And today we have several speakers, and we are happy and we are proud that we have some wonderful speakers who will talk and who will teach us, as we hope, how to prepare documents for scholarship and conference funding. So we're happy to have you here with us today, and please share the recording and these tips with your colleagues in your countries. And we wish you to have a productive meeting webinar today. Thank you.
Thanks, Albina. I'm Diane Pennington. I'm a senior lecturer and the head of the Library and Information Studies course at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. And I'm one of the co-chairs of these webinars, along with my colleague, Suzanne, who's here today, who will be helping me with the chat and anything else that we might need. So today's session, as Albina said, is to help students learn how to write applications and hopefully win them for scholarships to pay for your studies, for your degrees, and also for conference funding and any other kinds of funding that might be needed for you as you develop yourselves as library and information professionals. Just a quick note on privacy. The event is being recorded, including the chat. We will post the video on YouTube, and we'll share the link on social media after the session is over within a few days. So if you would please keep your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar rather than chat, so that we can make sure that we catch your questions as we go along, and we will answer them from there. But feel free to continue to use the chat to introduce yourself and share thoughts. But if you have something for the panelists, please put it in the Q&A rather than in the chat. Thanks very much. And so the program for today is we'll first have our opening keynote speaker from Antoine. Then we'll have the first session after the keynote will be, he's actually my PhD student, I'm very happy and proud to say, Mohammed Al-Hassan from the University of Strathclyde. We'll talk about his success in applying for scholarships and conference funding that he's done throughout his PhD journey. And that I will be covering just a few things from the UK's perspective from CILIP. So we have, as you'll see, 3 different countries here from the UK, from France, and from the American Library Association. So we're really happy to give you as much of an international perspective as we were able to put together. Mohammed is Nigerian, so he can talk about the perspective of applying for a scholarship from Nigeria to an international university. And so hopefully we'll have plenty of questions and some good discussion, and that you'll be able to leave here with some ideas on how you can go out and get some funding. So first, now I'd like to introduce Antoine. He was born in Paris, and he has served as an intern in several types of libraries in France, in Germany, and Japan. He's now the director of the public libraries of, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. Could you say that for me, Antoine? I don't want to mess up the spelling, the name of your city.
Too hard for English-speaking people, but it's Compiègne.
Compagnia. Okay.
Even for French people, it's hard.
Okay, that makes me feel better. He's been a member of the IFLA New Professional Special Interest Group since 2015, and he's also a member of the IFLA Management and Marketing Section Standing Committee. He's also Vice President of the French International Committee for Libraries. And again, the title of his talk is How to Help New Professionals Attend International Library Conferences, CFIBD's grant programs for French and French-speaking librarians. So from there, if you would like to share your screen.
Does it work? Thank you. I will talk mainly about the French program for grants for international conferences, and it's a program by CFIBD. But as many people here are here to get tips to get funding, I will try to give a few tips, of course, just from my point of view. As Diane just said, I am a member of 2 IFLA units, but the main thing today is that I'm one of the 3 vice presidents of CFIBD. CFIBD is a kind of special association in France. I think there are some equivalents in other countries, but it's a French librarians association. But the main goal of this association is to connect other French associations with international organizations, especially IFLA, but also LIBER for research libraries in Europe, and EBLIDA, which is also a European association of libraries and institutions. And I'm the director of a little public libraries network in Compiègne, but it will not be the main thing today. Today, I will have 3 points of view. The first one is as a CFIBD team member, and I will tell you how we give grants as an association. And the second point of view will be as a local librarian, because you may know that when you're working in a public library, it's not that easy to let your boss or your organization understand that it's very, very important to have an international connection, and that, you know, some people might think that international conferences are just a pretext to travel, which it might be sometimes, but never only. And at least I will also speak as a new professional, member of the new professional special interest group. And we new professionals very often struggle with funding. It's very hard to find money to take part in international conferences. So the first 3 tips are about writing applications. Then 3 tips before applying, that is, what should you do in order to be the librarian that can get funding. And the 3 last tips are to prepare the conference, or to act during an international conference to get funding for the next one. Because of course we want to get involved in international library cooperation, not only one time, not only 1 year, but maybe not our whole life, but almost. So the first tips are quite obvious, maybe, but keep it brief and simple. I can say that because we just finished the review of this year's applications, and we had some very, very long application letters. Sometimes it's relevant if you have many, many relevant things to do. Sometimes it's better to keep it brief, also because the jury that decides who gets a grant and who doesn't get a grant, they have many files to read, and especially if it's in an international context, you may know that not everybody speaks English fluently, and to read a long, long application letter in English can be a bit hard for some jury members. For our association, it's not exactly the case because most applications are in French, but anyway. The second one may sound obvious as well, be different. Of course, it's not that easy, but just avoid obvious text. For instance, two things we had in our recent applications. Many people said, oh, I'm really motivated. It's important for me. I'm really totally into it. Well, everybody is. I guess if you fill in a very long form and you send documents, etc., we guess you're motivated, and we have no doubt about it. But please be a bit more specific about your motivation and why we should select you and not another one. The other thing is that I think most organizations value specific profiles. So if you have a passion, if your job is very specific and it's very interesting for international librarians to hear about it, it will definitely be a bonus. And the last thing is quite important, is to inspire trust and just avoid flattery. You know, sometimes many applicants say, oh, I love your organization, it's great, it's so useful. Well, we work for free for it, and we are involved in it, so we totally agree with you. But just tell us why we should give you a grant and the real reasons. And usually there are some, because if you're applying, very often it means that you already have something to say and to share. And also, it might sound obvious as well, but don't lie. Very often we have ways to check, and we are used to study application forms. So sometimes we kind of know when something is not totally true. Especially don't lie about your language abilities. We will see it very quickly if your English is not as good as it as you say it is. As you can notice, my English is not perfect. It's not a problem. We accept people who don't speak English fluently, or even who don't speak French fluently. But just tell us your real level, and it will be okay. To give you a bit more details about our grants program and explain how it works, this year in 2022, we gave 17 grants, if I'm not wrong. The 9 grants for French professionals to attend the conference, the next conference in Dublin, and we try to get more, to give more grants every year through partnerships, and we have wonderful partners. For instance, we give 2 grants especially for students, LIS students, through a partnership with NCIB, which is the national school in France for librarians. 2 grants for public librarians through a partnership with the BPI. It's the main, well, the biggest, is it the biggest? Probably the biggest public library in France, and it has a national status. And they're also great colleagues. We work with them all the time. 1 grant for an IFBD delegate. You might not know what it means. It's the French-speaking Librarians Association. Not French, but we have some French people in it, but mostly French-speaking Africa and other countries, either in America or in Asia. And for CFIBD only grants. So this year we will help 9 French professionals to attend the conference. 6 grants for French-speaking professionals. It might sound a bit bizarre, but yes, half of the money we spend on grants is for non-French librarians, but French-speaking, because it seems important for IFLA to be an international organization and not only a European one. And that's why we give 6 grants. We try to give to different countries so that people can then speak about IFLA in their country and in their librarian community. And that's one of the reasons why we have this this program of grants for French-speaking professionals. And this time we have 6 different librarians from 5 countries. Only Africa, only Africa this year, but sometimes we have grantees from other continents, and also from Asia or from the Middle East, from North Africa as well. This time it's only the southern part of Africa. And 1 grant for a French professional to attend a BLIDA conference in Athens through a partnership with ABF. You may know ABF, it's the main association for French librarians. It's not the only one, of course, as in most countries we have, in most European countries, we have several associations. ABF is sometimes seen as more for public librarians, for librarians who work in public libraries, but it's more diverse than that. And it's also an association with which we work quite often. One question you may ask is, where does the money come from? Where does this association take its money from? And the answer is we get the money mostly via subsidies from the French state, sorry. 3 ministries, education, culture, and higher education. And that's, let's say, half of the money we have. And the other half, except membership fees of the association, but it's not a big part of the money, comes from past IFLA conferences. Because very often IFLA conferences don't give a benefit. I think it's quite hard, I think, for IFLA to find a good balance. But the good thing is when we organize them in France, for some reason, because probably some people want to visit France, I don't know. We have many attendees, and we managed to have a little benefit, and then we use it, and we've been using it since 1989. There is not much left, but we got a bit more in 2014 during the last IFLA conference in Lyon, and this money is totally, I mean, yes, all this money, not 1 cent is used for anything else. It's used to help future librarians to attend international conferences. Yes, in return, we ask for something to the librarians who get a grant. And the main thing we ask is a report, because for us, it's very important that the professional community, either in France or in other countries, hears about IFLA, hears about international organizations, and hear about international projects. So we ask them to write a report either during the conference or after the conference. To be honest, I coordinate this action, and I prefer when it's during the conference, because then we can send it to a professional journal, and every grantee publishes an article in a professional journal. So it's also a way of giving some echo to the conference, but also for a new professional to publish something. It's not a long academic article. It's an article focused on some very specific aspect of the conference. The main criterion for that is that it has to be interesting. Of course, it's not obvious to define what is interesting and what is not, but we try to discuss the topic with the grantees, so that in the end, it's original, it's new, and it brings something to the French or French-speaking community. We also try to build a network of French and French-speaking librarians, and we have WhatsApp threads, WhatsApp discussions, but also Facebook groups of grantees and former grantees. And we keep giving each other informations, sometimes many years after the conference is over. And last thing, we try to support local actions. For instance, if a grantee wants to organize an event in his country or in her country, we try to help him or her and to give him documents or materials or to help him with logistics so that he can also report in his country. 3 other tips. To be relevant, what I mean by that is that you need reasons. If you apply for a grant for an international conference, you need good reasons. So there are several ways of being relevant. For instance, if you present a poster at the conference or if you present a paper at the conference, it's a very, very good reason for us to select you. Basically, it's, yes, the main criterion. If you present something, then you'll be in the top list. If you don't, of course, people who really have a reason to attend the conference, well, will get first. The second thing is to be useful. How can I explain that? For instance, the report I was talking about, it has to be interesting, it has to be good, it has to be well written. And then, of course, the jury who gives the grant will think, okay, we can trust that person. He or she will really bring something to the community and it won't be wasted money. And the third thing might sound a bit the same, but it's not. It's be vital. If I stop talking about our grant program, I would just give a personal advice because I think the first time I got a grant is because I was helping the association itself. And outside the grant program, sometimes some associations might fund your trip because they need you to be at the conference. Just an example, if you, for instance, if you coordinate the grantees, they need you there. If you coordinate communication, they need you there. If you present something that is important for the association or for the organization, they will need you there. We had a few years ago, a delegate at the IFLA conference who was working for the ministry. We didn't have to give her a grant because we had helped her prepare a poster to present an action that had been led by the ministry. And of course, the ministry wanted her to present in an international context. So it's a bit more than useful. Sometimes they just don't have any choice but to fund your trip and your participation to the conference. A few examples. Maybe some of you know Asenfal. He was a CFIBD grantee and he took part in the IFLA conference a few times. But before that, he was a very brilliant librarian on Twitter, and he was already giving some of his time and writing blog articles, and he was quite famous on Twitter. I think he had already around 5,000 followers. So we knew that his influence already existed and that he would be able to report the conference to many people in several countries, and that it would be a good choice. And it was indeed, because Hassan is an incredible person. He's very brilliant. He became the director of a learning center in the center of Senegal a few years ago. And he's now a member of several IFLA units. The second one is Fanny Mill. It's just another example. She was a brilliant library science student, and she presented a poster she submitted a poster about her project, and it was a project in France for in order to implement United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so she got a grant, she presented her poster, she wrote an excellent report, and now she's a professional. She works for a university in Lyon, and she got a grant, and I think she's presenting a paper this year. So it's also an example of how a student can get some funding and then get more funding if her participation is successful. Third and last example, Patrick Megel. Maybe some of you know him. He's also a brilliant librarian. Sorry, there's a typo. And he was into videos and video games. And we don't have many librarians who are involved in international organizations and who are into video games issues. You might know that the cataloging of video games is quite an issue as well. So you can relate to the be different I was saying before. And he got involved in an IFLA section. I think he's still a member of an IFLA section. And he helped also with French projects about SDGs, and he's also involved in several French projects connected with the international issues. And I think now he's applying, or maybe he got a job in a library outside France. It's also sometimes the way it works. And finally, a few tips during the conference. The first is to be cheap. International conferences are expensive, but they can be a bit less expensive. For instance, if you share an apartment with colleagues or with other grantees. So it's also a way to reduce the cost of grants for us, so that we can give more grants to more librarians. And if you have any ideas about how to make a conference cheaper, I'm listening. We have some ideas, but I know people can be quite inventive in that domain. And to share an Airbnb apartment is a good idea, but also sometimes for food, for travel, there are some tips. The 8th tip is a bit more political. It's the opinion of myself, but also of my colleagues from the new professional special interest group, and also the French Association, that conferences are a bit too expensive. It's very hard when you don't come from a European country to get the money to go to an international conference, because the Congress fee is very high. And I don't know if it's possible, but it would be good that it's a bit lower. And also sometimes some sections or IFLA units organize midterm meetings that are very expensive, or even during the conference, some dinners in very expensive restaurants. And honestly, I wonder how they expect people from, I don't know, it can be people from Africa or South America or Asia, but also people from European countries that are students and can't afford a 50 euros meal. It really happened. And then, of course, explore more funding options. You have associations. I know that IFLA has grants. You can also save money by being a volunteer. I don't know if the result of the call for volunteers of IFLA has been published or has been sent today, but it's a very good way of dividing the costs a lot. And yes, and for that you can use the conference itself. When you are there, when you attend a conference, just be humble. Ask people how they got their funding. Ask organizations what they have, and sometimes it's useful to get the ideas from the people who are there, because somehow they found some money. And we all know that it's never obvious. I think time's up. So thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, I look forward to listening to your questions or comments or additions.
Thanks very much, Antoine. That was great. Really informative. Does anyone have any questions? There has been one that's sort of come in here where Suzanne was wondering, how many applications do you normally get for an IFLA World Congress conference on average?
Depends, but it depends on you. This year we got around 80. But usually it's a bit more because with the COVID pandemic, with the stop of many international conferences, we knew that we would get a bit less than usual. But in a normal year, it's between 150 and 200, which means you really have to make the difference.
Definitely. Wow. Any other questions or comments? So there's a comment here in the chat. A school librarian from Croatia will be attending World Congress in Dublin for the first time thanks to Erasmus Plus, because she's going to present a poster connected with one Erasmus project. So yeah, that's always a good idea if you have a project that you can do that can also provide some funding along with that to present your results or the work that you've done or the services that you've improved as a result of research, or those kinds of things can be really helpful, because then you know, as was said in the presentation, you have really something that can really benefit libraries and benefit your own library by getting yourself some visibility and getting out there and letting people know what you're doing can really help everyone.
Yes, and about this, it was a bit harder this year because there were very few calls for papers from IFLA, because the IFLA conference organization was a bit different this year and the year before. But for juries who give grants, it's very hard, because if a paper has been accepted, for us, it's a very, very good reason to give a priority to a person. This year it was hard because there were very few call for papers.
That's true. That is true. Yeah. Okay, well, if you still have questions that you think of throughout the webinar, just go ahead and put them in the Q&A for us, and we'll come back at the end and see if there are any final questions. But thanks again, Antoine, for such a great presentation. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. Our next speaker then is Mohammed Abubakar Al-Hassan. He is from Nigeria, and he is presently a PhD student, my PhD student actually, and I'm currently reading his first draft of his full thesis, which is very exciting, with us in the iSchool at the Department of Computer and Information Sciences at the University of Strathclyde. Before starting his PhD, he worked with the Federal University Dutse, Nigeria, where he taught courses related to computing and participated in various community service. After completing his bachelor's degree, he did his one-year mandatory service at Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, I'm sorry, I'm not saying that correctly, I'm sure you can correct me, Najib, University, where he functioned as a systems analyst to support the IT services of the institution's library. And the title of his talk is Looking for a University Scholarship or Conference Funding, A Road to a Successful Application. So Najib, whenever you're ready, if you want to share your slides with us.
Okay, right. Thank you, Dan. Right, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Mohammed Abubakar Al-Hassan, and today I would like to share my experience of securing university funding and conference funding, which I believe many students are struggling to secure. So the title of our presentation today, like Dayan mentioned, is Looking for a University Scholarship or Conference Funding. So a road to a successful application. So about myself, let me start again by my name, Muhammad Abubakar Al-Hassan, and I am from Nigeria, which is one of the densely populated country in Africa with nearly about 200 million people, and from Kano State, which is also located in northern part of Nigeria and is one of the very populated country in Nigeria. However, I did my first degree in Nigeria. I received my bachelor degree in computer science from Bayero University, Kano, and I proceeded to Malaysia, where I studied MSc in computer science from University Technology Malaysia, and presently a PhD student working with Dr. Dayan, and hopefully preparing to attend BIVA in the next hopefully couple of months. So the agenda of our presentation today is, firstly, we will talk about the sources of funding, and I will share my experiences of securing a university scholarship and a conference funding, and then discuss about the application requirements and share with the audiences about writing tips, which Anthony already discussed about that, but I will also share some of the useful tips that I think many students will be happy to understand, right? So the sources of this funding are many, but obviously they could be from the government institutions or from the private sectors. So for example, those funding bodies could be from the educational institutions or maybe the government institution that are providing support for citizens or maybe internationals to study abroad. So apart from that, there are so many bodies that are supporting maybe conferences and university degrees which have special interest. For example, like the IFLA, they also support people to attend conferences and so on. So one of the key things that we have to understand is we have to look at the sources. What are the sources that we have available, and which of the source is very suitable or relevant to our application? I mean, what source are we targeting? So from my experience, when I did my first degree in Bayero University, Kano, I was sponsored 100% by my parents, and it was an amazing experience. I did 5 years, and after that, I proceeded to University Technology Malaysia, where I secured a funding from the Kano state government. So now how I got this funding, I know some of the audiences may have a lot of questions to ask about how I got the funding and was the funding enough and so on. So the first step I considered in applying the scholarship was checking the requirements to see if I'm eligible to apply. And after reviewing all the requirements, I have seen that I was eligible to apply. And considering that one of the steps is to put in the application. And of course, we are not going to put in application verbally, but rather we have to put it in written. And the formal way to do that could be by filling in the form and attaching relevant supporting documents. So when it comes to a university scholarship or a scholarship to study a degree, there are some things that the sponsors are looking for from the targeted, scholars, or I can say beneficiaries. So one of the things that we have to get ready in applying for a university scholarship is, are the sponsors looking for a personal statement or maybe a research proposal, for example? Because if you are going to study a postgraduate degree, obviously the sponsor may ask you about your personal statement or maybe your research proposal. And the research proposal is about details, the full information about what you are going to research during your study. and how you plan to do it, what are the problems you intended to address, and so on. So apart from that, the sponsors are very interested to know why you are interested in applying for the scholarship and how your career objectives, I mean, your career goals are aligned with their, with the scholarship. So all these are information that were asked by the Kano State government, and also again, in some cases, the sponsors may ask you about what class of degree did you graduated with. For example, you may have a first class, you may have a second class offer, and so on. So after I finished my second degree in Malaysia, I started my career in Federal University Duthe, and it is one of the newly established university in Nigeria. And after about 3 to 4 years, I also secured another funding, which allows me to join the University of Strathclyde for my PhD. And that funding came from the Petroleum Technology Development Fund, PTDF, which is a body in Nigeria that is managing the tax that the country gets from, I can say not only tax, but managing some of the surplus money that the federal government used to get from the crude oil, because Nigeria is one of the oil producing countries in the world. So, however, I went through several screening before securing the scholarship. And the first step I considered was putting the application. I filled in the form, I prepared a research proposal and submitted the application and attached all the relevant supporting documents. So one of the things that students have to bear in mind that whenever you are applying for a scholarship, you have to think about the set of documents that you put in your application. What are the set of documents that are mandatory? What documents your sponsor, is looking for, which are necessary in support of your application. So you have to make sure you have all those kind of documents. So with the PTDF, I put in the application, and I was lucky to be invited for an interview, and which is one of the steps process for awarding the scholarship. And in that interview, you have to present about your research, and you have to respond to the interview panel about any question they ask. So I can say this is a brief summary about how I got the scholarships from these two bodies. And then, along the journey of my PhD, I attended some conferences and also presented some research papers. And one of the conferences I attended is the CHAIR conference, which is Conference on Human Information Interaction and Retrieval. And the second one is European Conference on Social Media. So all these are conferences that are related to the research that we have been doing, and we managed to secure funding to present our research papers in these conferences. So these conferences, we couldn't have attend and present in these conferences without funding. And we managed to secure funding from the University of Strathclyde and also from the SEXA, which is the Scottish Informatics and Computer Science Alliance body that is having a special interest in informatics and computer science in Scotland. So my advice with fellow students is that whenever you are planning to attend a conference and you think about the ways that you can get a funding, how you can write and look, how you can write for a conference funding, you have to first of all discuss this with your supervisor. And after you discuss with your supervisor, look at the available funding options you have. And the best way to start putting in the application is to check the application requirements and eligibility and what amount they can offer. What is the maximum amount they can offer? Will the amount be enough? And so on. So because at some point, when you are thinking about this conference funding, you may have a funding very close to you, but you may not know. But obviously, your supervisor will be the one to give you that information, for example. However, conference funding is not like university scholarship, because usually a university or degree scholarship is a scholarship that is, I can say, big, much bigger than conference. So there are some things that conference sponsors are looking at from applicants. And some of those things already, Anthony has already discussed about those things. So we have to look at, for example, is the conference related to our research? How is the conference related to our research? And what are the goals? I mean, what are the goals of our research that are aligned with the conference? And why do we need that conference funding, for example? So we have to consider all those things, and also how we can put in the application. So in the next slides, I will discuss about my experiences with applying to CICSA conference funding and the University of Strathclyde. So like I mentioned earlier, whenever you want to put in application, you have to consider the general requirements. An example of those requirements could be the eligibility criteria. So for example, there are some scholarships that are restricted to only some specific locations, and you have to look at those eligibility before you put in your application. And you have to look at the specific requirements. Is the scholarship meant for your field of study, for example? Obviously, if that scholarship is not meant for the field of your study, you may not be shortlisted. So, and then you have to consider the deadlines, which is one of the things that many students are struggling to, to beat at some point. So when I put in application for university scholarship during, about 5 to 6 years ago, I wrote a research proposal and also filled in the application form and so on. And also recently, when I got a scholarship from the CICSA to attend a conference in the to attend the ECSM conference, which is the European Conference on Social Media, I also put in the application. So what I have to make it clear is that conference, like I said earlier, is not like a university degree scholarship whereby you have to put in a personal statement or research proposal. You have to know that in a conference, you must first of all prepare the set of documents the sponsors are looking for. For example, it could be evidence that you are presenting, not only attending the conference. So one of the things that you have to consider before writing in the application is you have to prepare all the set of requirements needed by the sponsors, and you have to check the time. Could you be able to check, to submit in the application within the time period stated by the sponsors? And you have to also be original. You have to be confident and unique in your application, because your application represents, I can say, who you are. That is the first way that you communicate with your sponsors. So try to put originality in your application, and then take a look at the points needed in the maybe cover-up letter or personal statement, or maybe application form. What are the key points needed by the sponsors? Outline those points and try to provide the relevant information needed by the sponsors. This will help the sponsors to assess your, application, and also, if successful, win the scholarship. So even though English is not my first language, I will strongly advise applicants to be very simple and clear in their language. I did that also, very simple and clear. And if it is in a language that is not your language, once you finish writing the application, you can share it with your supervisor to make sure you have a very simple and clear writings without much error. So again, you have to describe in your application who you are and why you needed this scholarship. There are many reasons why you need the scholarship. For example, it may be one of the objectives of the sponsors is also aligned with your research, is also aligned with your findings, for example. It may be your contribution will support their activities, for example. So are you only attending or presenting in the conference? These are some of the things that you have to also describe in your application. So again, you can round up your application with the impact of the scholarship to the course of your study. That is, if you are applying for university degree scholarship. So these are some of the things that you can try to put in your application. What are the impacts of the scholarship to your career, to your course of study? So in the case of, again, conference funding, it may be you are not looking for registration fees. It may be you are looking for travel fees to enable you attend the conference. What I know from my experience is that some conferences provide support to students in addition to discount they provide for early registration and so on. If you as a student and also a presenter intended to volunteer in the conference, some conferences may also give you a waiver or maybe provide you with the transport fee that will allow you to attend the conference. So these are some of the things that you can consider, and check the form. Try to prepare before filling the form. Prepare all the necessary mandatory documents or information they needed, and try to fill in the application using simple and clear language. Make sure you submit the application within the time period. So unlike university application, university scholarship application, in conference funding application, the deadline is short. So you have to think about the time. You have to make sure you use the time appropriately. So explain to the sponsor why you are attending the conference. Like I said, it may be you are presenting, or it may be you have a very strong reason of attending. And also discuss how the conference is very, very aligned. Is aligned with your research. How is it aligned with your research? This will capture the sponsor's attention. The juror, like Anthony said, to possibly consider your application, and if successful, grant you funding. So again, discuss about the benefits as to why you are attending the conference. One of the benefits, for example, it could be you want to build your research network. So there are so many reasons why we attend conference. So try to discuss that in your application. And one of the things I forgot to tell you is always consider the word limit provided by the sponsors, because in some cases, the sponsors may ask you to put in a personal statement or a research proposal, not more than 200 or 500 words. So try to make your proposal or personal statement within those limits. In some cases, conference funding doesn't require students to put in research, obviously research proposal or personal statement, but you can also write about the reasons why you're attending the conference and provide fill in application form and provide evidence of maybe your paper that you are presenting and so on. And after attending the conference, you have to apart from sharing your experience with the sponsors, but also create a workshop or a seminar presentation whereby the sponsor will be happy to see how you presented in the conference and share the knowledge with the community, with the stakeholders and also the conference members. So this is the end of our presentation, and thank you very much for listening, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thanks very much for having very informative. Really showcases all the hard work you've done over the years to get to where you are. So I feel like a proud mom right now. Does anyone have any questions? I've had some good. We did see someone to ask about a feedback link in the chat, but we don't have any sort of survey prepared or anything for you. But if Suzanne did put a message in the chat with my email address and hers, since we are the co-chairs of these webinars. You feel free to send us any feedback that you have directly to our emails, and we will make sure to take it into consideration. Okay, well, thank you very much again, Mohammed, and we'll see if any more questions come in throughout the rest of the webinar. I am just going to give just a very short overview of a few things from CILIP, which is the, as I said, the organization for library and information professionals here in the United Kingdom. I had tried to get someone from CILIP to speak to you directly today, but unfortunately, they were not here, but were not able to join due to other commitments, which is understandable. But I do have some links that I can share with you and some thoughts. So I spoke with two people directly. One is the head of CILIP in Scotland, and his name is Sean McNamara, and he is himself an information professional, and he runs just the Scottish area of CILIP. So it's kind of, it's a related organization, but separate. And he gave some good advice here about the professional development fund that he offers through CILIP. And I'll just put these links into the chat, and they're also in the slides. If we'll circulate the slides later, and you can also click on those as well. For now, I'll just put these into the chat if you'd like to look at them on your own time. Maybe you can bookmark them and take a look when you have time. And the Professional Development Fund in Scotland is open to anyone who wants to do things like go to a conference, attend an event, attend a course, something else that CILIP Scotland has organized. We have an annual conference every year. We're excited to be back to our first in-person conference in CILIP Scotland in June this year, so we're really excited about that. But it could also include online events as well. So they do a lot of webinars and things like that. And there are just the different opportunities that are available here for Scottish librarians, and some examples of people who won funding, and they've written reports, and you can read their reports about what it was like for them to be able to attend the conference or the event because they got the funding. So that page I give you also gives you some tips on reading those reports from colleagues who have been successful. The other one is the overall CILIP organization. So that's the larger CILIP, all based in the UK. So this first one here that I will be sending here. Here's the CILIP one, and I just realized the Scotland one didn't go through here, so I'll put this one as well. So CILIP has a lot of different grants and bursaries available for students and for professionals at all levels. And you can search through here to get some ideas of, even if you don't qualify, even if you're not based in the UK or can't qualify for it because you're still a student, or these might be for students only, but there's a lot of them, and you have to kind of read the details in terms of what kinds of applicants they're looking for, what they want in the application. We have a lot of groups in CILIP that are either based on region, so areas of the UK. England, obviously, they have a much bigger population than we have in Scotland, so they're more divided by areas of England. and then there's the SILIP based in Ireland as well, which is smaller but still active, and there's also SILIP in Wales. So for the different 4 countries that make up the UK, there's things that are based on region of where you live within the UK, as well as subject areas. So for example, in SILIP, I'm the chair of the metadata and discovery group. And so we do things related to metadata, linked data, cataloging, classification, some data science work, machine learning classification that, for example, what Najib is doing for his PhD. And so there are, in our case, we have a bursary for people to go to the annual conference for SILIP, which is coming up this, well, we're having an in-person conference as well this summer. And that's just for, we have a bursary, for example, for people to apply who have an interest in cataloging or working as a metadata specialist just within our area of the subject. And sometimes they will look for things like somebody who's never been to a conference before and wants to have their first experience, or maybe they have had a paper accepted, or again, just reading the guidelines about what kind of application they're looking for is really helpful. And I think having been on some of these award panels in the past, I would just say that these can be competitive, and if they're not appropriate to where you are in your career or within your subject, or your reasons for it don't match up with kind of what the application is asking for, you're not going to always be terribly likely to get the funding or be considered as well as someone who's carefully made a choice around this. This is specifically for students who are interested in advocacy in libraries, or whatever the topic is for the particular bursary. So that's just a few ideas there, and there's a lot of links on the SILIP site especially. So those are in the chat, and we'll send those around with our other slides, so you can take a look at those in your own time. So I think we'll, just in the interest of time, you can always email me or ask me questions in the chat, but I'd like to go ahead with our closing keynote speaker at this time to make sure we're sort of staying to time. So our closing keynote is Michael Dowling from the American Library Association. He is the Director of International Chapter Relations Offices, and his keynote is called Conferences, Awards, and Scholarships from ALA. So Michael, whenever you're ready, please share your screen, and we're looking forward to it.
Just a moment.
Oh, your desktop looks like mine, very busy.
Yeah, yeah, sorry. Let me
it's
just
fine.
get back to where I was. Okay, I think I'm in good shape. Let me just move myself around a bit. I think just having a place where I can put everybody in. So, close that. Does everybody see my screen now? Hello? Oops.
Yes, we can see it.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
My apologies. Okay, let me go back. Okay. Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining today. Interest in primarily looking at international conference opportunities. But I think one of the things I just want to mention before I get started in talking a little about ALA and opportunities there is that you really want to get engaged with your national, local associations, because that does provide opportunities for you to get connected early on and with your national groups, which then can kind of be a springboard to help you get to participate in international conferences. As Antoine and Mohammed mentioned, again, showcasing how you're already engaged in different activities within the library field, but certainly in cases with, say, IFLA or ALA and others, they always want to see kind of how you're connected to library associations and what you're doing there. So whether it's at the student level, which is really the perfect time to start doing that, I encourage you, if you haven't joined your local national association, to do that. Also, taking the long view. Unfortunately, as Antoine and Mohammed and Diane mentioned, opportunities to get grants from conferences are usually pretty competitive, and they're always competitive. But again, I think as Mohammed mentioned, don't always be looking at the conference to provide the funding source potentially for you. Please do look at your universities, especially in your universities now, because again, maybe there are grant opportunities for travel. Again, if you get a paper approved or a poster session or something approved at a conference, and they may have that the political science group has been getting most of those funds or something because they know about them. So I would strongly encourage you to kind of look at what your university has at this point as opportunities. And as Mohammed said, as you move forward into your career, look at those government opportunities. Definitely, I think that's a way to go. So I just wanted to kind of highlight some things about the ALA and our grants and awards, just as an example. And again, for us, a lot of these awards, I think just like a lot of CILIP awards are geared toward our members. So that's another thing as you consider looking at opportunities on where to go. If you're a member of your national association, that national association usually is a member of IFLA. So when you're applying for an IFLA grant, the fact that you're, a member of, in say Mohammed's case, if he's a member of the Nigerian Library Association, back when he was there, that that is a leg up when you are trying to look for funding from that type of source within the actual conference going forward. So ALA, again, most of our grants at this point and scholarships are really for people who are members of the American Library Association. Just like CILIP, the American Library Association is open to all members from all around the world. So again, if you're interested in eventually going to an American Library Association conference, you can join now as a student member. And then, as I said, in other places like CILIP, you could look at there. So again, kind of mapping out, I think, as like Antoine and Mohammed said, you may not find your opportunity this year, but don't be discouraged. I mean, that's the challenge, I think, is getting discouraged if you aren't funded the first time you apply. But for most people who've been involved in international activities, they can tell you that it takes a while. As again, you may get lucky the first time or two, but usually it's it's going to take you 3 or 4 years in many cases to kind of move your way up to kind of get the experience or kind of have the connections to kind of find those opportunities. So just wanted to mention that before we go. Again, our conference, ALA's annual conference, is every year. And we'll be in DC this year. I know we're coming up. It's only a couple months away. So again, for our conference, I know most of you, it's not going to be an opportunity you're going to be able to take advantage of right now. But just to kind of showcase this, as I said, just as an example, so, what you're trying to target. So are you trying to eventually go to an IFLA Congress? Would you like to eventually go to an ALA conference? Would you eventually like to go to a CILIP conference? Or if you're, again, if you're French speaking, would you want to go to the French conferences and be eligible for one of those awards? So it's kind of looking around for, what places you would like to go to. And again, kind of mapping out, how you might get there. And as Antoine mentioned, how you can do that in a reasonable way with trying to manage your resources as much as possible, but also setting yourself to look around ahead of time before grants. So, again, this year, like I said, all our grants are obviously done, but again, say, looking out 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, I think, as far as where you might be looking toward. So looking out and seeing where those conference and events are, maybe in the year or two later, are good things to do. So ALA's conference, we do have international colleagues come to our conference, so we certainly welcome them. Like I said, we have about 1,500 international members, and we get usually 400, 500 international librarians from outside the United States coming to our conference. So we do, again, try to provide special opportunities and experiences for international colleagues. So they are there at the IFLA conference for you. These are some of the things that we do have at our conference. So I think as you're looking for international conferences, it's like kind of what are the opportunities within the conferences, as Antoine and Mohammed mentioned, as far as where you can maybe apply for a program to be part of, or et cetera. So again, these are kind of some main things. We have a pre-conference that is done every year. That's usually a call for papers. ALA, most of our program is not a call for papers, so that does limit people from outside the United States a little bit. Usually our programs are organized by our units, and they go out and find their own speakers. I'll mention a little bit later too, but the international posters session. So we do have a dedicated part of our posters is for international posters. That's usually about 25 each year. So that's something, as if you're an international librarian and a student, that's definitely an opportunity for you, as I said. And then other things that we have to help you if you come to our conference. I think the other thing to mention for you as you're trying to get involved is, with all this, because of the pandemic and people are having hybrid conferences, or even if it's an all virtual conference, that's an opportunity for you, if you're not able to get travel grants, is to participate in virtually. And in many cases, you may be able to do a paper, or again a digital poster session somewhere. So again, if you're not finding a lot of funding initially to go to in-person conferences, I would suggest maybe also looking at trying to figure out how to participate in some of these digital experiences that are happening and are going to continue to happen. So a couple things that ALA does. Again, these are more dedicated to our. Let me go back. Sorry. To our members. Is that we do have a couple programs for students. And so I think that's, again, kind of looking, if you're wanting to get involved nationally, again, what are the national associations having for student opportunities? Because again, I think that's a good entree, to start with, and then it can, again, lead to networking that can lead to ideas for where to go for international conferences. So these are, like I said, some of the major ones that we have, programs that then, if you are part of these chapter groups that are selected, or you're a member, a Spectrum Scholar, these are ones that do have quite a bit of funding support to help you come to our conferences. Hopefully in the coming years, we'll also have those for some international colleagues. Right now, we unfortunately don't have that, and with the pandemic, things have slowed down on adding some new programs for us. Just wanted to mention, we do have some awards for students specifically. Again, these are mainly designated for ALA student members. So again, if you are very interested in maybe eventually coming to an ALA conference, it is something to consider to possibly join as an ALA student member. So we'd have one that's geared toward people who are going to go into business librarianship. So that's the Brass Student Travel Award. We do have one that's for our chapters by our new members roundtable. And then at the bottom, I have the link to the main travel grants page, and I'll make sure I can try to pop that in the chat in a little bit later. Again, sometimes it's again starting with the easiest thing that you might be able to do to get into being active as a participant in a conference, just like at IFLA and many other associations now. There are poster sessions, and so I think as Mohammed, if you're doing research, you can obviously look for putting in a request to do a presentation, but poster sessions are usually the place where most people kind of get started at a international conference, is to, what are you doing in your job, or what is going on with your student activities that you're doing that you'd want to share with others. And then we have the International Relations Roundtable at the American Library Association. So again, as you're getting connected, you want to get connected into whatever international community connections are going on in your national associations or in international activities, international groups, and what they're involved with. So in this case, like I said, these are colleagues in our case who from the US and outside the US who are interested in global librarianship, and these are connections then with people who have already had experience finding grants and other opportunities. So I think networking within whichever sphere you can find for finding out people who have already done and learn from them. Certainly you were able to learn from Antoine and Mohammed today on some ideas and opportunities. And, you know, it's those types of connections and people who can help you move yourself down the road so that you can get involved, you know, for your first international conference, and then maybe again, being part of an IFLA section, et cetera. So I just wanted to also, just again, if you're not able to come to our ALA conference this year, our next conference is going to be in Chicago next summer. Again, just as I mentioned, you want to kind of start looking beyond this year for conferences. So again, if you find a conference that you're interested in, they may not have the destination yet, but if you know the rough time frame of when it's going to happen, you can start planning for trying to set yourself up maybe to say, well, in 2 or 3 years, I'd like to go to this, you know, sustainable library conference or an interlibrary loan conference, et cetera. You know, as Diane mentioned, you know, the specific events. So again, definitely be looking out. There's general conferences like the ALA conference you can go to, but there certainly are a lot of individual focused conferences. And I think, again, as far as kind of your ability, if you are kind of, say in the case of the business librarian. So if you're a business librarian or wanting to study business librarianship and go into that area, again, you know, we do have a scholarship for that for our conference, but also there are probably other smaller events that are specific for that area of your field. And as the others had mentioned, you don't want to probably spend and waste a lot of time looking for things that you are probably not going to feel that you'd be the best candidate for. So those are just a few examples and ideas that I wanted to kind of showcase from the American Library Association. And it's been great to be part of this and happy to answer any questions that people have. I'll stop sharing.
Great, thanks very much, Michael. Thanks to all of our speakers today. We have just about 5 minutes left in our schedule time, so we don't have too much time for discussion, but I think if there are any other questions or ideas or further tips that anyone would like to ask from our panelists while we're here today, we do have about 5 minutes. We have one question in the Q&A area, and this is asking how you can select an MPhil topic for a library science subject. I guess from my perspective, and I'd like to see what the other panelists have to say, choosing a topic is always difficult for people, especially if you've never done a major research project or that sort of thing before. But try to choose something that will get you funding. If certain topics are more applicable, depending on the current trends in the field. For example, Najib's area in data science, machine learning is one that's pretty well funded right now because there's a big need for doing this type of analysis. So obviously you have to do something that you're interested in, but I think it's also important to be practical and consider what your future prospects are in terms of not just getting a scholarship or not just going to conference, but also the area of what is going to be needed in the field. And you can always do that by looking at job postings or looking at conference plans and seeing what the kinds of things that people are talking about at major conferences like ALA or SILOP or any of the other ones. I don't know if anyone else has any other bits of advice. No? Okay. Another question we have is if there are any links of Masters of Library and Information Science programs with scholarships for people in developing countries. Suzanne says she would like to be able to answer it. Did you have something? Oh, it says you would, okay, never mind, I misread the notes here. So I guess as Mohammed was saying, it does really depend on which country you're coming from. Some countries, for example, that were part of the Commonwealth, there's Commonwealth funding, and Najib and I, sorry, he goes by Najib, and that's what I think of him as Mohammed, as you know him professionally. We were talking about that earlier today, that the Commonwealth funding applies to those countries that are associated with that comes from the UK government. And there are other things as well that are specific to your country. It might be good to look for opportunities through your governments or your more local governments, state or provincial governments or federal governments, as well as the universities that you're interested in applying to. I know, for example, the University of Strathclyde has a page of scholarships, but it has a big search interface where you can search for your subject, your level of study, what country you're coming from, what kind of funding you need. Is it for a PhD? Is it for a master's? And so that can also depend on the directions that you're wanting to go and what you qualify for. So I don't know if there's a list of MLIS programs, but there are lists of the ALA accredited programs on the American Library Association website, and SILP has something similar. So it depends on if an accredited degree based on our professional bodies may or may not be important in your country. That's certainly something to look into. I know SILP does accredit some programs outside of the UK currently, and ALA accredits programs in Canada. And we have reciprocal agreements with also all of us in New Zealand and Australia. And a lot of European countries will take these accredited degrees as well that are accredited by our professional bodies. And IFLA is working on some international standards for this as well that will hopefully be part of another project that I'm involved with in IFLA, and hopefully that will be, it's in draft form now, but hopefully that will be made available later, and we'll hear more in Dublin probably. So just some things to consider. Does anyone else have any other things to add? Okay, well, if there's nothing else, if we could just thank everyone again for attending, and we have some links up here on the slide if you want to learn more about IFLA and other events that other divisions might have going on. There's always a lot going on depending on what you're interested in, and our division page is there. We also have Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the social channels for this is for the Education and Training Committee that we're in here with this webinar series. So you can look at our section in our division for more details. And our next webinar will be on the 25th of May starting at 5 o'clock, 1700 Central European time. So whatever that translates to in your part of the world. And you can register now. The registration is available. Again, it's another free webinar. We will not be having calls for papers for this one, but we're asking different divisions to talk about what's going on in their areas of IFLA and things that students can do to get involved in different areas of our organization. So did anyone else have anything? Suzanne, Albina, did you want to thank everyone? And I don't have my video in front of me. Albina, it looks like Albina's not here. Okay, but thank you again, everyone, for attending. Thank you again to our great panelists. I really appreciate your time and helpful insight. This will be recorded and shared later on our YouTube channel. So we'll post the link on social media when it's available. So spread this around to any colleagues, your other students you know that might want to know about this, which is probably everyone. Suzanne just put the link to our YouTube channel there in the chat. And thank you all again for attending. And we hope to see you all at our next webinar in a month's time. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day, your morning, your evening, wherever you are.
Thank you so much, Diane and Suzanne, for organizing this very, very relevant webinar.
Thank you again for presenting.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye for now. Bye.